Hi and welcome to Intrepid Wisdom. My name is Deborah J, and on today's episode I'm so excited and honoured to introduce you to one of my closest and dearest friends, Erica Poole. Erica is a mother, wife and British trained osteopath living in Nova Scotia in Canada, specialising in paediatric care. Erica moved to Canada after graduating 15 years ago so she could rediscover a relationship with nature. As the land of lakes, rivers, oceans and forest, Nova Scotia gave her exactly that opportunity. She now lives on a 50-acre plot of forest and farm with her beautiful family, where she continues to work and study with specific interest in childhood development, natural therapies and herbal medicine. You're so welcome.
Thank you.
So we met a couple of years ago through doing a herbal medicine apprenticeship in Scotland. We were living pretty rugged and it was a pretty interesting time studying herbal medicine, and it was just really nurturing and fascinating, and we just got really close. We clicked very quickly. And the one thing that stood out about you for me was you're just a beautiful human. You're such a beautiful soul. And you're just really authentic, but you've got your fingers in a lot of different pies of things that you're interested in as well. So you're quite a curious wisdom seeker, wisdom keeper. And today we're going to talk about intuitive parenting or natural parenting and just that whole process. But before we get into that, I would love if you could share with everybody listening a little bit about who Erica Poole is, and who you were as a child and how you've come to doing what you're doing in Nova Scotia.
Okay. Thank you, Deb. So I actually, although I'm in Nova Scotia now, I actually grew up in the UK. I grew up in Suffolk, and I was a very lucky child. I had two very loving parents and a younger sister around me. I grew up in rural Suffolk, so on the edge of a little traditional village, post office, little shop, couple of pubs, very picture postcard, and got to experience a wonderful, playful, supportive environment. My parents were both kind of academic people. So mum was a teacher and kind of had some expectations about learning and development. Like she really, I think they both really saw childhood as an opportunity to explore as many possible avenues and see which ones kind of fit with the facet of who you were. So I realized looking back, I was extremely lucky. It wasn't because of like a massive, I didn't come from a very super wealthy family or anything like that, but my parents made every opportunity that I could possibly have available to me. So yeah, and I grew up my parents really loved to garden. They loved to garden. And so I grew up in a house with a very kind of capsule kind of special secret garden kind of world. I don't know if you ever read the story of the secret garden. I remember our family gardens always being like that. We grew up in two houses mainly, and the second house had a slightly larger garden, and they really create a magical space where my sister and I could kind of get lost in our own worlds. And we were given different responsibilities with animals, so we always had animals around us. As many animals as my mum could fit in the space. She if my dad went away on a conference, when he came back, there was some more ducks or chickens or whatever. And my dad and my mum are both very soft-hearted, and would never want to see anybody or any animal in distress. So if we ever saw animals on the side of the road, they would be picked up. And my dad used to like to joke that nature knew that Carolyn Poole was the paramedic for wildlife. And then if she was driving along a particular route, a squirrel would kind of faint in the road and want to be picked up by her. So growing up, we had our dining room was very rarely a dining room. It was almost always a convalescent space for some random piece of wildlife. So there was an owl that lived in there for at least a year before it was healthy and fit enough to go outside, and seagulls. And if anybody ever thinks about rehabilitating a seagull or having one as a pet, they don't make a great indoor pet. They're pretty messy. So yeah, lots and lots of animals, and really they deliberately tried to create this very special place where we could kind of come home to and be protected by. And like I like one of the most special animal relationships. So I'm a big believer in relationships with animals and developing friendships, and learning how to read what those animals give in the way of communicative cues and what you can sense from them. And so one of my earliest relationships would be with a duck called Jemima Puddle Duck. I'm a big Beatrix Potter fan, and yeah, so I spent my Jemima lived until I was 23 years old, from when I was 9, and so I spent lots of time outside, kind of watching her and being with her and looking after my chickens and swinging in hammocks and things like that. It provided me a very safe space too, because I really struggled with bullying when I was in school. And I think now looking back, I was told that I was different and I didn't fit in any way. Um, and I sensed everything in a classroom. And there were, when you're a teenager, there are some big changes going on with everybody. And so when you've got nearly 30, like 13 to 16-year-olds in a classroom, there's a lot of energy going on. And I really struggled in that environment. And I had some developmental issues with how my face developed. And so I wasn't kind of that quintessential kind of, I didn't have a lot of social ability because I didn't use it, because I didn't have a lot of confidence, because I was picked on early for how I looked. And so the shyer I got, I think the easier a target I was. And so coming home to a really supportive place was important. And music was in a really important part of that place as well. And so I was always involved in orchestras and bands, because when you were there involved in music, nobody cared what you looked like. They just cared about how you played and um, how you interpreted a piece of music, and how you like not broadcast it, but how you gave it to the world. Like it was about how you expressed yourself, rather than kind of what you looked like. And so that fit better with me, because I think I fit into the team that was an orchestra nicely and in a protected way. And I was involved in different sports and horse riding and anything to do with animals. Volunteered at Cats Protection League and in spare time did Duke of Edinburgh, and loved to hike. And I always noticed that I just do well in small groups and with intimate, like one-on-one or one-on like 2 or 3 trusting relationships where I feel safe. Um, yeah, and then I had a massive head injury after a horse riding accident, and dealt with it. What, like looking back as an osteopath now, must have been a really severe head concussion. And so I was dealing with a lot of vertigo and things like that, and attempted to be treated by my family doctor, but it just wasn't working. Time wasn't making it any better, and I wasn't able to go to school. And so my mum one day, it was just kind of how life happens. At the back entrance to the playground of our school was an osteopathic clinic, and they just put up, we'd never really known what it was, like, because they'd never had advertising out front, but they just put up new kind of window signs that said we treat migraine and headaches and blah 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 other things. And one day when my mum was going in to kind of speak to the school, she'd noticed this signage and called them up, and there was an appointment available that day. And it just so happened, like later, that it was with the principal, like the head of the clinic. He treated me once, and I felt incredible. Well, initially I felt like I was again hit by a car, and like went home and went through a bit of a healing crisis with it over the kind of 24 hours. But then I felt amazing, and I think I was always struck by this human's ability to just touch me and influence health in a very, very positive way. It was magic. For a 14-year-old, it was magic. And that was my initial kind of taste of osteopathy. And I was very lucky because it just so happened, so I carried on through school and wanted to kind of volunteer at their practice. So I used to kind of do file charting and things like that for them. There's evenings and I'd come and observe. And so they pushed, all of them they were all graduates of the British School of Osteopathy. And so they pushed quite hard for me to also be interested in going to the British School of Osteopathy, which I did. I applied and I was accepted. And at the time I'd actually become quite sick because in hindsight, I was actually starting to deal with the symptoms of lupus. And my grades weren't that great to get into the university, but because the principal of the practice also just so happened to be the head of anatomy and physiology at the school, I was given this incredible recommendation letter because they saw the qualities in me that would make me a good osteopath rather than just the grades. And so that is how I've become an osteopath.
Wow.
So I was feeling very, very lucky that it just so happened to be that practice, and they were very, very supportive, and it gave me this opportunity to kind of be nurtured by them. Yeah.
And it's beautiful, really, because I've also had treatments by Erica, and I will say, wow, like, you wouldn't think that you can really pack a punch for it, but my God, you can really pack a punch. And it's really transformative what you do. And also, as an osteopath, what you do is you're actually so intuitive. And as your friend, I can say you're an incredibly intuitive person. It's really, really beautiful to have a session with you. But then if we were to look at, you moved on from doing osteopathy, as a general kind of clinic, and you've started to specialize working with babies a lot more. And I find that area really, really fascinating because as somebody who practices Reiki and reflexology and all these kind of other healing modalities myself, I've noticed what I really love is I love when you're working with kids, because kids haven't formed this brick wall that they put up where they don't want to be convinced into healing, and they don't want to be placeboed, and they don't want to be it's almost like adults have this, like, you're not going to fool me. And I do it. I totally do it as well. And I have done it, and I get in my own way. And even as somebody who knows that that's how I get in my own way, I know that I do it. But the beauty about babies is when people have even come to me and said, look, my baby can't sleep, and, have you got any advice? And I'll give them advice on, different points that they can go to and different oils. And the baby sleeps sound. And I'm like, of course it worked, because the baby hasn't cognitively decided this is not going to work for me. So if anybody has ever any doubts in terms of any alternative modality, watch a baby recover using these modalities, because it'll just recover like that.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. They don't have, there's no formative awareness of, or there shouldn't be. Like, in the average child, there's not going to be any formative awareness of a positive or negative interaction in that way. Like, there's no expectation. If especially if you're dealing with a child that's not like verbally aware, as long as there is a non-verbal consent. And that's going to sound kind of maybe strange to some people, but I was very, very lucky that I had an opportunity 9 years ago to study with an osteopath called Viola Fryman, who is like, she's kind of like the god, like she's a very big deal in the world of pediatric osteopathy. At the time, she was in her 90s, and she was, I think if I said this, I don't think I'd be insulting any Viola Fryman lovers, and I am a very deep, I've got all of her books, and I'm deeply inspired by her, but she was a relatively cranky old lady. And it was amazing because she wouldn't stand for any BS over what somebody thought that they were able to do as an osteopath and what they would interpret that they could do. Your role and your responsibility was to go in and find the health with this child and then aid them in their recovery, whatever that might be, but not set expectations or limitations in your mind over what that might look like. And she always used to say, like, when you meet a child like you'd meet an adult. Like, they may only be a day old, but you meet them and you gain consent from them for you to work with their body. And so when I meet any child, the first thing that happens, a parent, well, we'll talk about the child for a long time. We'll talk and discuss their health history, but then I'll get the parent to place the baby on the table when I'm not in the room, while I go and kind of get my hands cleaned up. And then I come in, and then the mother or the father or both and I or the grandparent are there with the baby, just talking to the baby for a little while, getting to know them. And then once I kind of get that look of, yeah, I'm ready for you to treat me, I'm ready to have a relationship and interact with you, then I'll go and start interacting with them.
And that's beautiful, because I think we, you know, that's not even something I think many people would consider. Like when a baby is going into a room, baby doesn't know what's going on. And then, you know, you launch in and you do stuff to it and it's like, what's going on? And I think
Yeah.
that's really, really beautiful that you're building this little bit of a rapport before you just launch an attack
Yeah.
of health. And
Until a baby's about 3 months old, and it's different with each baby, different, like each like little spirit, like they, I mean, they're a spirit in their own right, and they have kind of, they've been landed into this body that they don't know how to move, and it's through experimental movement and reflex stimulation that a human body learns how to move itself. But the brain initially doesn't understand that it is a self. Initially, the brain understands and believes that it's part of its mother. So for at least the first 3 months, they don't necessarily identify with the fact that they're independent from their maternal structure. And you know, that kind of goes along hand in hand with the idea of a fourth trimester and so on. So yeah, when you're meeting, especially when you're meeting a baby under 3 months of age, like for somebody to kind of come in and invade that space with their physical and energetic kind of input would be so wrong, and it would be an assault to their system. So yeah, we just kind of wait and give them some time and space before we kind of start sussing out where they're at in their understanding of themselves.
so can I ask you, so we've an idea in terms of you've a beautiful healing side to you. So how does that translate to putting the mommy hat on and, you know, coming home and being mommy and that intuitive parenting that I've definitely seen you have. So you've got the most beautiful daughter. She's just stunning. And I've been really, really grateful to, and I've actually said this in my, you know, with my own friends and family here, I'm like, oh my God, I just love how she parents, because, and like, if I ever become a parent, I want to be able to parent like that, because you have this very, very delicate, nurturing, nourishing mother side to you, but you also know how to put your foot down and say no, and put boundaries in place, but they're really healthy boundaries. And I'm always fascinated when I see your little one in the background, and I'm like, oh my God, it's just, and it comes so naturally to you. But we had discussed peer pressure, because this is something I'd like to bring up today. Peer pressure for parents and peer pressure for the kids. We live in a world where, you know, everything's about brands and labels and the latest trend, and this is what, you know, such and such up the road has, and I wanted, and all the rest. And you've managed to parent in a way that your child doesn't need all that. So can we discuss that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's definitely like, you know, I'm like, I would by no means say that I kind of switch into gears like easily from like this, from the osteopath that kind of interprets this child in my treatment room to kind of coming home tired at the end of the day and possibly really hungry or hangry, and like stepping into a maternal role. Like you know, I have my downs, but I allow myself to kind of feel them, and kind of feel like guilt associated with them, and then kind of interpret how I want to change that. How would I change that situation again for the future? But and I think guilt is a really useful parenting tool. I think it's something that we shy away from because we think it's dark and it's sinister, and it's associated with something that we don't like about ourselves. But actually it can be a really, really useful tool, and I believe it's there like specifically for evolutionary purposes to kind of guide us towards like, okay, why do I feel like this? Okay, so what should I do to change that? But yeah, with my daughter and peer pressure, so I'm quite lucky that she's actually she's in an environment in school where she's in a rural kind of French school, which is great, but she is in a classroom with lots of other different children with different backgrounds, which I completely respect. And because the world is like that. Like if I'm trying to raise a child that's going to become a healthy adult to understand her own boundaries and her own beliefs, then I want to understand what her beliefs are now and what my beliefs are now. I really really believe all these beliefs that that a human is raised, you've got your own instilled belief system and what you think is right and wrong. You do learn a lot of that along the way through interactions with other humans and animals and the environment. And so when I'm with B and I'm parenting with her, I really try to work with that. We do a lot of discussion. And some of that happens in a car. I was listening to somebody, I can't remember who, but it was about kind of parenting and discussions and difficult discussions. And children can often find communication sometimes a bit confrontational, but they don't have time to necessarily kind of, when you're in discussion, you're an adult and you've got all of these developed communication systems and you've already know what your belief system is and you're discussing with a child about a problem. Let's say a birthday party. Here's a good one. A birthday party and she wants to go and she wants to take a present. And in our family, we try as much as we can to not collect a lot of materialistic goods and things, because I try to really kind of enjoy the things that we don't own, like the nature and environment. And so when it comes to that kind of situation, there's a pressure on her, like there's an immediate pressure. At some point in time in the party, there's going to be a present opening moment. And if she doesn't, it's all very well me, Erica, kind of instilling in her the idea of love and and creativity that she may be able to bring, like drawing a picture or painting a picture or making something out of clay and giving it to that child. But that child's expecting an LOL doll.
Yeah.
Right? That child's expecting, because that's what's cool in that child's world. And that's what that child's expecting, because that's what they've seen at other birthday parties and things like that. So, I mean, this is something that we've been talking about quite a lot over the last year. We have a birthday party this weekend, and Sophie and I have been discussing this quite a bit. And how do I get her to the place where it's not me enforcing my beliefs on her, that she's understanding these choices and what type of human does she want to grow into be? Like what type of human does she want to become? And how does she want to represent her friendship with this person whose birthday party she's at? And so we do quite a lot of that discussion in the car when she doesn't have to give me an immediate answer. And sometimes what I'll say to her is, this is the situation. This is it. This is how I feel. And this is how we could go. These are a number of different pathways. I want you to kind of have a little think about it. I want you to think about how you want to represent that. And very often when she's given time, like she'll come back and she'll give me these beautiful responses that really are just based out of genuine love and kindness, that don't come from a place of materialistic kind of guilt, where kind of I'm having to give you something because that's what we all do, right? So yeah, I try as much as I can to kind of give her the opportunity to have time to think about what her beliefs, what type of human she wants to become, what her belief system is, so that she can frame it herself, rather than the two of us like spending time where she's not being given the chance to kind of create herself, and I'm like constantly hammering around her all the time to mold her into what I want her to be.
And what's very interesting as well is, again, look, I'm not a parent, so I can't really talk about it. All I can say is my own views of the world and what my experience is and how I feel. But I do think, I've worked with disabilities for years. And one of the big things about working with disabilities was like advocating, independence and responsibility and all this kind of thing. And, we see it in children nowadays. It's like, do you want the blue cup or the yellow cup? And it's all this, everything is about choice. But if I'm totally honest with you, I think we've gone to a total extreme where in the world, we're so pro-choice about everything, about everybody having an absolute say in absolutely everything, that we're actually not teaching our children how to have boundaries. And we're not teaching our children how to discern what's right and wrong, rather than going, do you want all these plethora of options and choose one of these plethora of options. A child, to a certain extent, as far as I'm aware, needs to be told what to do in some way, shape, or form. And there's times where it's important to give them choice, and there's times where it's important to show them that they don't have choice all the time, because we live in a world where we don't get everything our own way, and we can't get everything our own way.
Right.
So with that in mind, and then also like with this kind of peer pressure, how do you feel that's kind of worked in your relationship with B? Like, she's making these decisions, and they're big decisions, and she seems to be coming to the answers herself, but then she has to go back out into the real world with mummy. It's fine, but then she has to face these fears or these decisions and then be responsible for them.
Yeah, so there definitely are breakdowns. There's definitely tears when like the reality of the world hurts, like it does. And I guess when she was younger, there definitely were more boundaries. I was definitely a very boundary orientated parent because I was busy. When she was young, I was running a clinic. So I was very like, there wouldn't have been a blue cup or a yellow cup choice. There was a blue cup and it was ready and it was right there and you get in the blue cup. No, I want the yellow cup. I want the one with the fancy straw. No, we're doing this right now. This is what we're doing. Mummy's got the blue cup. It's full of the same water that the yellow cup would be full of. And that's really what it's about. It's like, so she will have gone through a very like boundary orientated younger childhood for sure. That kind of led her to a place. There were a number of battles where I was like, the classic one that I think a lot of parents would recognize is like moving from one activity to another. Let's say, for example, we're about to try to leave the house and we've had breakfast and we have to get to daycare or like where she's going by a particular time because I have to get to work by a particular time because my patients might be understanding about me being late, like, on and off. But when it happens every day because I'm being ruled by a 2-year-old that's refusing to put her shoes on because she wants to be barefoot outside in the snow, it's not going to work. So there was quite early on, I let her suffer the consequence of a bad decision. If she wasn't understanding my boundary and why I had the boundary when she was young, I would let her suffer the consequence of the boundary. Like, I don't want you to cook my peas. Okay, then you're going to eat them frozen. And I'd let her have some frozen peas and she'd hate it. And I'd be like, now, shall I cook the rest of them? And she'd be like, yes, I'd like you to cook the rest of them. Or the one that like really stands out, and like maybe like I don't know if it like is coming across now like I'm a mean parent, but the one that was classic was I don't want to put on those boots or I don't want to put on my jacket and it's -20 outside and a foot deep in snow. And we could sit on the floor by the front door for a long time where I'm negotiating with her what it will feel like to her body if she goes outside, or I could let her go outside.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
the front doorstep, like, she's safe, she's secure. She's not going to go off and try and hike a kilometer away from the house and then get hypothermia. I'm not going to let that happen. But I am going to let her go outside and get her feet wet and then cold. And she's going to feel the cold immediately. And she's going to come back inside and go, yeah, you know what? Boots are a really good idea. Right? And so from a very young age, we did that quite a lot. And so I think she quite quickly learned that the boundaries that I placed there were boundaries for safety and out of and her, like trying to support her naive interpretation of the world, and allow her to experiment and fail, like allow her to kind of push me, and I'd give a little bit and then she'd feel what the consequence of that was like, because otherwise you don't the concept of why a parent's in your way probably would become frustrating. Right? So why is this parent always in my way? Why is this parent always kind of telling me what to do? If the parent backs up a little bit and lets that child experience the electric fence that is the world around them, right? Like the painful experience that -20 feels on them, or the consequence of having not done something, then they get to experience why that parent is there supporting and creating those foundations.
And it's important not to, I would imagine, again, I'm speaking from not being a parent, but I have so many, me and my mum have so many parent conversations because I've always been very curious by the world of parenting for some reason, even though I'm not one yet. Or I don't know whether I will be, but I find that, you know, there is a power struggle. It's like, I know more than you do. And it's like, we live in a fast-paced society. Our patience is a lot less than what it used to be. You know, if we want an answer to something, it's on our phones in about 2 minutes. Years ago, you had to look up the encyclopedia and it took you half an hour to figure it out. And
Or
at
go to
that
the
stage, you
library.
weren't bothered anymore, you know.
Yeah.
But the point of what I'm saying more so is, I think it's what you're saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, is to pick your battles. And when you pick your battles, know that do it in a way so that you're managing their expectations and telling them that this is the reason I'm telling you that I don't want to do it. We're not going to do it. You're not going to do it, whatever. So, and then let them make the choice to do it. And then they know, oh, mommy was right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's not like just let them go off and freelance do it, but give them the before part as to why you're initially wanting them to not do it and make the choice, to
Yeah.
show them that, okay, you now go and do it, make your mistake and come back. And now you know that mommy is right. So when mommy's saying something to you, you can listen to her a bit more.
Yeah. And to always be like, the thing that I have really noticed with her is to always keep the same pattern of behavior. So if you said that you want this outcome, or you believe in this outcome once, don't flip it on them, like, and change it. Don't be flippant. Don't be like, well, you know, I can't think of something right now. But you know, it's not okay to kind of say, no, we're not going to be buying this day when we go into the grocery store, and you're not going to get the toy that day. But then randomly kind of be like, yeah, now you can. You've got to kind of keep those boundaries similar. Yeah, and some of these issues are really complicated, so they just take time, and sometimes the time isn't there. And that's, I really think, some of the struggle in parenting, that if we weren't working and we weren't we weren't working, we didn't have all these expectations around us and pressures on us, and we all got a great night's sleep, and we weren't dealing with our own relationship issues on top of it all, then when our child has these complicated and painful learning experiences, we'd just be able to sit down and take the time to go through them. I think one, like while you were just talking, then I had a memory of us talking about a particular occasion with her where she happened to do really, really well in a thing in school. I can't remember, it was like a reading thing or something like that. And this is like me kind of admitting to one of my failing moments. Normally that would mean that we would then go and do like something together as a family, or she and I'd make sure that it was an experience-based reward. Like, we're going to go to the beach and we're going to have a fire pit and we're going to roast some wieners or whatever, something that she like clicks into that memory bank, because love and a memory will always be there. Nobody can ever take away from you. You don't have to like carry it around like physically, but a plastic toy just isn't. A week later it's probably broken, the dog's chewed it up a little bit, and it's no longer like of interest. And but this day I was really, really tired, and I was dealing with quite a lot of stress through my work. And so this day I asked her what it is she would like, and she said that she really wanted an LOL doll. And this is like this is my LOL doll story. So we go to Walmart, and like, I know like in UK we don't have Walmart, but it's like a giant like place full of everything. And so we go to Walmart because she has been there with another family member and she knows that they're there. And so she's already scoped out the situation. And we go in and she's picking out the LOL doll, and I'm feeling wretched inside. Like, my whole body is kind of having this. I opened it up. I opened up the door, and she decided on that day that she wanted this LOL doll. So so here we are, and I'm feeling inside me like I want to change my decision, but that would be wrong because I gave her the opportunity to make a decision, and I'm really struggling when I get feeling like not good about it intuitively. And we go to leave the store, and she turns to me and she said, "Oh, it's so good. Now I get to go to so and so's birthday party." And I said, we stopped, like I stopped dead. And I'm like, what do you mean you now get to go to so-and-so's birthday party? And she said, well, they're having a birthday party and they told me I can't go because I don't have an LOL doll. And I wanted, there was like explosion of emotions, like about the weight that she had been feeling and this world that she was placed in, and how on earth she came to a place where another child told her she couldn't be socially involved because she didn't own something, not
And
because
it's
of her.
so hard because that's another thing I was going to say. Like, you know, you have these beautiful ways of bringing up your child, and there's so many parents who could be listening to this saying, you know, I don't like my kids having sugar, and I like them to have
Yep.
natural food, and I like them to spend time in nature and not in front of a TV, or I don't like them playing video games, I like them playing physical games or whatever. So there's lots of different parents, and this is not a condemnation of people
No,
who are parenting in a different way at all, because,
no.
you know, as parents can only parent to the best of their ability,
Yeah,
and you can only parent to the best of your understanding in a situation.
yeah,
And the reason I wanted to do this particular podcast was just to widen the lens and perspective of another way of looking at this. And I just found, for me personally, your style of parenting I just really, really love. But you have your own way of doing it, and it is very natural. And, you know, B doesn't sit in front of a TV for hours
no,
every day, and that's just your style. So as I
yeah,
said, it's not condemning anybody else,
yeah,
but that's just your style. But then you move into the world of where behind closed doors you've made all these decisions and she understands them, and you know, everything's great. And then that parenting, and I remember my mum saying this, do you know, when your kids turn 5 or 6 or whatever, when they go to school, they're not
yeah,
your children anymore, they're
yeah,
children of the world.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so no matter how much you've put in place to nurture and nourish them, it depends then on, you know, who they're hanging around with, or the
yeah,
parents, or the, you know, the parents of the kids and the other kids they're meeting and all the rest of it. And if they're doing something completely different to you, like
yeah,
you could be saying no chocolate at home, they could be stuffing their face with chocolate when
yeah.
they're in school and you don't have control. How do you feel about that?
I like my instinct to answer that question is I don't care. I don't know. I mean, I do care. I care about how difficult that might be for Beatrice. I know, like, you know, the school originally said like a no candy policy, and I was like, that's great, like no candy. I don't have to have the whole like discussion with her about how the human physiology like deals with sugar, and then you hit a sugar low and blah 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 blah, and why she has to have oats for breakfast and stuff. Like, so initially the school said no sugar, which makes sense. Like, you don't want a bunch of like hyped up kids on sugar. Like, it like would make the teacher's life very difficult. Um, but I think as time has gone by, like her hearing from other adults around her, like her dentist and doctor, and seeing other parents, like you know, there are other parents around that do make similar decisions. I'm not in, like, she's not in a Waldorf school or anything like that. She's definitely in a public school. But she gets to see like the consequences of she's getting to put together the consequences now. So like, yeah, another kid has sugar, or drinks a lot of juice all the time, and she gets to see kind of erratic behavior and the fact that they have to go to the dentist to get fillings, right? So she's starting to kind of pick up on that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, there's no right way, and it really is a challenge. It really is a struggle, and it's incredibly painful because you bring this little being into the world and you think that you can protect them, and you think that you can make the world a magical place for them, and you can at home to a certain extent, like, but sometimes not. Like, if there are financial issues in the home, or there's a partner that's sick, or you can't necessarily create that like magazine version of what everybody thinks a home should look like, and that's okay. Because I think that a child should understand that we all have differences. We all have differences in belief, and communicating and not judging is a
Mm.
really important part of becoming a human. Understanding that her friend sitting next to her might have different dietary choices and their parents make different decisions, that's okay. But figuring out what it is that she wants or that she believes is part of her foundation because of how her parents and her grandparents are guiding her, is a big part of that. And I'm not alone, right? Like I'm very, very lucky that my parents moved here. They live right next door, in another farmhouse. And my parents-in-law, her other grandparents live 10 minutes, 15 minutes away. She is very lucky to be literally part of a tribe of human beings that have similar, we're all different, and there are definitely like occasional conflicts over belief systems, because my husband and I, we just had different upbringings, but we all kind of want the best for B, and so we kind of give her these different like flavors and just gently mold and kind of try and work with each other, through talking about where our boundaries are, and so on, like, as much as possible, without judgment, because I can't remember the quote. I'm terrible at remembering quotes and jokes. But it's like, it's our differences that make us stronger. I'm not sure who that is who says that, but I really believe that everybody's just trying to do the best job that they can with the resources and the family backing that they have. And that's legit in every situation. And we all have different ambitions and ideas about what we can create and what we actually do create. But if we can all like not judge and support each other and be kind about it, that's where it's at. Like, that's where it's, that's where it at. I never try to kind of, I never instill in Beatrice the judgment over so and so. She's like, well, so and so gets to bring candy, and I'm like, yep, they do, yeah. So okay, so let's not think about them, because we don't do things in life just because so and so is doing it. We do things in life because we're choosing to stand on our own autonomy and choose to do something, and then it will be us that suffers the consequence of that decision, not them. So like, so and so gets to bring candy. Well, now how do you feel about that? What are the reasons? Like, what is it that like would be the consequences of that, or like the outcomes? And then we discuss that. We don't focus on why the other child gets to have it, and oh, that's not fair, and blah blah blah, and their parents must be bad because they choose. No, we don't go there with that. We just focus back on our own unit and our own like self-discovery and our own family.
And I'm assuming that takes practice, because I think, I think of my own life and using mindfulness, and I hate using the word mindfulness. It's just about being more present with your own thoughts. But I had to learn that over and over and over again. And I had to forget it. And then I had to remember it. And then I had to forget it and remember it again. And anything that we learn in life that's a new path, you kind of need to create that path. And it sounds like, I would imagine you had to learn that somewhere yourself. Did your parents speak with you in that way, or is this something that you learned intuitively yourself on how to, because to know how to turn that conversation with a child to one of meaning and substance, and to not react ourselves and take our own crap into the moment.
Yeah.
There is a sense of mindfulness in that, because you need to let your own stuff fall away and just to let it be about the information. So did you learn that from your parents, or was that something you researched, or how did it come about?
My parents were definitely big talkers. We talked our way through big events, and every small event too. I was very lucky. They were very like busy workers. My dad at one point in time was like traveling to London every day from Suffolk. It's like a good 2.5 hour journey there and back. And then there was at one point where he was working up in Manchester, so he'd leave on a Monday and come back on a Friday. And my mum was holding down a full-time head of year position at a school an hour away, so they didn't have time really on their side, but they made sure that particularly like time around bedtime and meal times like were really, really important. Like, we did a lot of discussing. My mum definitely wears the trousers in our family. Like, she's definitely like the commander of the ship, and she had a very strong sense of what was going to be right and what was going to be wrong. And that came from a deep, I like, looking back at the time, I didn't ever question it, because I think I'm somebody that because I was so shy, I very much took on other people's, if somebody said that I was something, I would kind of take that away and reflect on it. I would never argue. I'm not an argumentative kind of person, or at least when I was a child. As I grown up and I have my sense of beliefs, then yeah, like I will kind of or knowledge, I'll kind of argue my point. But yeah, definitely like mindfulness, it definitely wasn't called mindfulness in my home, but I think the opportunity for discussion and thought and the opportunity to think about things without a sense of like immediacy. I don't ever remember being like, you got to make a decision, you got to make it now. There was definitely an opportunity to kind of think about how we might come to a decision about what was going to happen. Yeah, but I think as time went by, mindfulness is something that has come to me more because of the body that I'm in. So I've noticed over the years that with my lupus is an environmentally, I mean, like there's a whole other conversation, but my body seems to be influenced very significantly by the environment that's around it and the relationships that are around it and the stress that comes into that from that environment. And so the way through that is to try and not be reactive. Like the personality, the metaphor of the disease is this reactive like response. And so what I'm noticing is that the more I can be patient and mindfulness about the different problems that come up, the less I see a reactive quality within my body, the less I have to deal with the symptoms of the disease. And I seem to do okay with that, like everybody else, when it's like one problem here and one problem there and so on. It's when they all cluster together at the same time, then I'm like, okay. And that's when nature or a really good friendship comes in hand, right? Like you're like, okay, I can't juggle all these balls. I don't know how to be mindful about 5 different problems at the same time. So I need to go back to my tribe. I need to go talk to my mum about it. I need to break this down a little bit and give myself some time to think about it. And definitely with parenting, I've gotten into the habit where I like my parents, I don't try and make quick and rash decisions about things unless they're obvious, like yellow cup or blue cup, or like how she has to come home. Like if my husband's at home, then she needs to come home by bus, right? If I'm working, like there's no like, yeah, daddy's going to drive all the way into town just so you can be picked up because you want to be picked up. No, like we have to, like there has to be a sensible way of processing things. But I try as much as possible to give myself time, and if I don't know the answer, I will genuinely say to her, I don't know how I feel about that answer right now. I need to have like a think for at least a couple of minutes, or I need to kind of, mummy's going to think about it this evening and then let's have a chat about it tomorrow. And we follow through on that. Like I never let her down on it.
And I love that, because I actually think, again, from my own experience in my own life, using meditation is actually what gave me that space. I used to think meditation was, I just thought it was like people sitting in lotus positions, getting this like some sort of placebo effect that everybody else seemed to be getting. And I was like, I don't really get this. And then it clicked in for me. And then when it finally started to work, I was like, oh, it does work. But I found through meditation that it weirdly allowed me to have space and time between the event and my reaction.
Yes.
And it's really weird. And all I can say is it happens. It's really strange. You know, where previously an event would happen, I'd react in a very defensive way and, you know, and I wouldn't even give time to think how I feel. What do I actually think about this? Why am I reacting that way? Why is the other person saying what they're saying? And like in most situations, you don't have that time. But isn't it so beautiful to turn around and say, like, you don't have to be perfect. And to say, do you know what? I don't have an answer for that now. Like literally, I don't have an answer. And I hope to have one maybe this evening or maybe tomorrow, but I'm going to come back to you. Do you know?
Like this is an important discussion. We're not going to drop it. We're going to have this discussion. I'm really glad that you raised it, but I just need like some time to think about how I feel about that. And I think that's so important. Like I was thinking about this earlier when I was talking about something else. It's really, really important for children to see failure in their adults. I think it's so hard. We feel like we've got to do this perfect job. We've got to give them perfect food all the time, and we've got to have a perfect relationship with our partner. And because goodness knows what will happen if they see an argument. You know, well, if they see an argument, they get to see what happens when two people don't agree and they lose control of their emotions. And that is going to happen in her lifetime. it's going to
As long
happen.
as it's not like
Well,
unhealthy.
yeah,
Yeah.
obviously it's like healthy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like at some point in her lifetime, there's going to be conflict, and to understand that doesn't make her like a bad human, but like to pull back from that and use the tools that she has for communication, or giving herself time and space to be able to figure out what to do with that conflict is really important. It's really important to see. I was listening to a lecture once, and the lecturer, psychology lecturer for children, he said one of the worst things that we can do is give our children a false sense of the fact that the world is perfect, and that you as an adult are perfect, that you're always right, and that you always have the answer, and that you always know what's going on. Because as soon as they hit the world and they feel like they don't have the answer, then they feel like something must be wrong with them.
Or that they failed or whatever.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah,
one thing that I'm taking away from this whole thing as well, I think, is the idea that, if we can get to know ourselves a little bit more, and what makes us react, and what makes us, if we just get to know our own emotions and our own, and also get to know what our own personal boundaries are and why they're there, or
yeah,
get to know why our own morals are there. Did we inherit them by our parents? Are they our morals? Are we going to stick by them when times are hard?
yeah,
And what does that mean when you translate it to children? Because it's not, that sounds all very like, go off and study how to be a parent and then become a
yeah,
parent,
yeah.
and it's not like that.
No,
But there are small little nuggets that I hope people will be able to take away from this conversation today, that might have just helped them to just look at things a little bit differently, or maybe take some of what you've said and apply it to their own life, whether it's just even just that. I think if they were even to take anything away, even if it's just, I don't have an answer for that now, I think that
yeah,
that's
yeah,
gold dust.
yeah,
Or I'm not perfect, or I
yeah.
don't feel good about this, and so because I don't feel good about this, I need to understand what that means for you, so I need time to think
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like if that instinct isn't feeling good, just press the pause button. Like that, it's okay to press a pause button. One of my favorite lactation consultants in our area that I got to work with a lot over the years, when I became her favorite phrase was, be kind to yourself. Being mean or like judging yourself isn't going to help the situation. It's not going to help you be creative and understand where that pain or that feeling within you is coming from as a parent, because that parenting is dredging up a lot of background and the hows and the whys about why you're making the decisions that you are. If you go into that in a stressed way, like with a lot of judgment on yourself, you're not really going to give yourself the ability to like pull it apart and dissect it and understand, why do I keep making this, why do I keep giving this response, or whatever. So yeah, being kind to yourself and not trying to sense judgment around you, right? Like if the people around you don't accept those decisions, or you don't like, yeah, I guess sometimes there's the the awareness of the fact you think that those decisions aren't going to be accepted, but they may well be, like very easily, or maybe they're not going to be accepted by. But what matters is that you as a parent can't really go through life not following your own compass. Right?
So I like to ask everybody when they're on the podcast what their intrepid wisdom is for the generations that go ahead, and your own wisdom, whatever's been imparted onto you through your own family, perhaps maybe from your grandparents and parents, or from your own wisdom being a mother. What intrepid wisdom do you feel would be really important to share with other mothers or parents or fathers and carers?
To find that spark in the child. So like when I'm working with a child, or yeah, when I'm working with any child, I think that the reason why I love it so much is I get to like identify and figure out what this kid's personality is like, and how to support and stimulate them in the right way to get the outcomes for the health concerns that we have, or movement, whatever it might be. And so I really think like that finding the spark and finding that the reciprocal relationship that exists between each of us, whether it might be Erica and Debs, or it might be Erica and her dog Annie, or it might be Erica and a hawthorn tree, like finding that reciprocal relationship and that spark and honoring that within each of us, and taking time to develop those relationships would be like a very important part of, I think, who I feel like I recognize as I am as a person, and what I want to teach Beatrice, like that in it, what I want for her to be able to carry forwards. Recognizing that spark and learning how to support to ignite it so that it can fulfill its best potential and learn how to experiment with the world around it. That's all we are. We're just wonderful humans trying to learn how to navigate the world around us and trying to be brave about experimenting with new things, and so finding that spark and igniting the confidence to do that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
So for anybody who's intrigued by Erica and her incredible parenting, I just really do. I really enjoy how you parent. I love watching when Bee's in the background and seeing the two of you have chats. But anybody who's interested or has any questions, Erica is a mine of information. You're only getting to see not even the tip of the iceberg in terms of her wisdom. And hopefully we might even have you back on again, because I thought of like 20 different things I'd love to have topics and talk about. You can get in contact through the Intrepid Wisdom website, which is intrepidwisdom.com. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thanks.
So for those of you who are watching the video or listening to the podcast, don't forget to like, comment and share to let me know that you care. To stay up to date, hit the subscribe button and bell to receive notifications. And for podcast links, check out intrepidwisdom.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram. And if you want to support the show, there's now a donate button. So you can click that on the website, on the YouTube links, and also on the podcast as well. In the meantime, stay curious.